for a good family camp. I mean, obviously, it's the first family camp. I think a lot of people didn't know exactly what to expect, but I think we had a really successful family camp. It was a good time. Not too many injuries. Um, so some of us a little bit, or maybe a lot sore, but anyway, not too many injuries, not too many bad attitudes. Brother Wayne, I always pray whenever I play a game. I always want the people on the opposite team to have a good attitude whenever I beat them, and so I always want them to have a good attitude whenever I win. But anyway, like I said, we had a good time, and thank the Lord for that. It was good. It was good. Sometimes you don't know. Brother Randy had just basically lay speakers, speak. I don't know, which I wasn't there Wednesday night, but I don't know that any of the people that spoke were actual preachers that spoke. But it's people that just have something on their heart, and God blessed the people. Brother Donnie, I wish we could have recorded Brother Donnie. I wish we could have recorded Brother Donnie Rigdon. I mean, if you see him sitting over there, he hardly says a word. But I tell you what, Brother Wayne, he was gold. I mean, he was solid gold. It was like a 10-minute stand-up comedy routine before he got into his lesson, and he did really good. And the look on Miss Marilyn's face was priceless as he was doing his lesson. And so Lincoln did a good job, and Brother Brian Grogan did a good job, and everything. So anyway, if you have your Bible, turn to John chapter number 14. John chapter number 14, and Brother Randy told me I was going to be the closer. He told me the other week that he was going to have me do it, but then I didn't find out till Thursday afternoon that I was doing it Friday. I was going to be the last one. And so a lot of the people in here were in here. A few of y'all weren't, but I'll try and catch you up to speed pretty quick. It did go along with what I taught a couple weeks ago. By the way, I do want to say thank you to Brother Justin for filling in for me last week. He said Brother Tyrone, but he got nervous and he forgot to tell his joke. He was going to tell everyone that I needed the week off to play golf, and that's why he was up there, but he forgot to tell his joke, which I understand that. I was nervous Friday night, and I had a few other jokes. I didn't have them written down, but I had a few other jokes that I forgot to tell. But he said he was going to say that Brother Paul was off playing golf, and I said, well, actually, it would have been pretty funny, which Brother Wayne's got a golf shirt on today. It would have been pretty funny because last week was the Masters week, so people would have been like, I can't believe he would go to the Masters and not be at church. But he forgot to tell it. But anyway, so on Friday night, I spoke on basically, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? Well, your thought life, because what you think is eventually what you're going to do. And I talked about whenever I started out, I talked about how I just went to Maryland, and when I went to Maryland, they had something new this time, Brother Hollis. They had notebooks up there, Brother Wayne, of pictures from basically when the church started. And so there's a lot of pictures. I've got some on my phone. My wife's got a bunch of pictures. She took more than I did. But pictures from when the church started up there in Maryland. And so whenever I opened that book up and I started going through it, and there's pictures from 1989, 1990, and then I got saved in 1992. But there's pictures of a group of us. And I can't exactly locate, I can't tell from the background exactly where it was, but I think it's at Faith Baptist Camp, and it's a group of the teenagers in that group, and I told them that they're in that picture. There was two preachers' daughters in there. There was a young man that was going to get called to preach and ended up marrying one of the preacher's daughters, and they were good kids. But somehow, some way, the devil got everyone in that picture but me. has gotten out. Now, one of them they may be going to church some now, but the devil got them out. And again, but I never told the story. I never finished the story of a couple of them. And so I wanted to do that for just a minute this morning because I didn't finish it the other day. So my buddy that was the preacher I told y'all made a bunch of laps around Faith Baptist Camp. He made a bunch of laps around about any church he'd ever been in. He was just that kind of guy. He was just excitable and loved God and was serious about his relationship, and he was dedicated, and like I said, I asked him to be in my wedding. But he couldn't be in my wedding because him and her were actually going on a missionary, actually I think just him, but he was going on a missionary trip to Mexico, and he went to the missionary trip to Mexico instead of being in my wedding. Now, like a year later or whatever, I was in his wedding, and I think, I don't remember, was it 2000? When they had the Winter Olympics out in Utah? When they had the Winter Olympics out in Utah, and again, maybe I'm wrong on the date, but whatever it was, he actually went out there. They took a bunch of churches, because obviously Utah is going to be Mormon country, and they took a bunch of churches, took a bunch of people out there, and they just went out there and handed out gospel tracts and everything. And again, like I said, he was very serious about his relationship. And it didn't go with the theme of Friday night, but this morning I wanted to talk about it for a few minutes. What got him out was not lust, Brother Jay. It was not that. What got him out was bitterness. It was bitterness. It was anger. It was jealousy. And what happened was him and her really wanted to have a child. And I feel for anyone that really wants to have a child and cannot have a child. And you have to be careful, because that will consume you. You can talk to my mother-in-law, I'm sure Miss Jimmy, you can talk to people who've sat back and watched. A woman that wants to have a child, that for whatever reason God is not allowing her to have that child, that will consume them, and they have to be very careful, because it'll take them down a road that they don't want to go down. And so they wanted to have a child, tried to have a child, and couldn't have a child. Finally, she was pregnant, and she ended up not being able to carry the baby full term, Brother Jay. And I don't remember exactly how long. It was premature. Modern medicine, she was actually premature. But modern medicine is really good, but they could not save the baby. Everyone prayed. And I think we were up there, or we went up there. I can't remember what, but for whatever reason, I ended up there. And so went to the funeral. Went to the funeral of this little, child. And I noticed, Miss Jimmy, after that, when I called him and talked to him, there was another family in the church. And they were just having children. They were just having lots of children. They weren't having any trouble having children. And I noticed, Brother Tyrone, that these people that had one time been friends, now when I talked to him, he was not talking, he was not talking good things about him. It was always, he was talking down about him. And how that they weren't taking care of the kids right, and how that they were doing this, and how that they were doing that. And bitterness had crept in, Brother Jay. It had crept in. It had got inside there, and jealousy crept in, because they, again, like I said, they're trying, and actually, what happened was he didn't have real good insurance at the job he worked, so he got some credit cards, and he got those credit cards, and he was paying for all the doctor bills to try to have a child. And he just got in over his head, and then he got to where he couldn't pay his payments, and he ended up having to file bankruptcy. But anyway, so he was so bitter, and he was so jealous, and I remember the last time I saw him again, I was up in Maryland again, and I didn't get to see him because they came to Brother Norris's, Miss Jimmy, when Brother Norris was in South Carolina. They came to Brother Norris's meeting, and so I was in Maryland while they were in South Carolina, and we kind of crisscrossed paths. And so they were coming back, and they actually had a group of young people. They had a group of young people with them. And so I called him. I'm like, hey, where y'all at? We're coming back from Maryland. Are y'all coming back from South Carolina from the meeting? Sure. And we ended up meeting in Virginia. We ended up meeting at a Big T Burger. Was the restaurant. But anyway, we met at that Big T Burger. Last time I saw him, last time I've ever talked to him. And so, Brother Jay, they were just coming back from a meeting. And they were coming back, and me and my wife met him. It was him and his wife, his sister, another girl from the church. And that young girl from the church was also on the verge of crashing. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that a lot of times it's like dominoes, Miss Jimmy. You've got a group of young people, and they all look like they're doing so good, but Jake, just one of them crashes. And it's never just one. It's because someone else was being propped up by that person, and someone else was being propped up by that person, someone else being propped up by that person, and one of them crashes, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them go down in a row. And so me and my wife, we met him, we talked to him, and we got in the car. And again, I mean, by that time I had a child. Adriana was born. We didn't have Bub or Grady yet, but Adriana was born. But Brother Jay, that bitterness had consumed him to the point that almost any young person their age that had a child, well, it bothered them. And we got in the car, and I said, I don't know, something's not right there. And my wife's a lot more sensitive than I am. I just kind of, I'll just kind of shrug my shoulders and say whatever. They're just having a bad day. My wife's a lot more sensitive. She studies people more than me. Anyway, she said, yeah. She said, I noticed it too. And Brother Wayne, it wasn't 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later that, again, they done something. They got called before the church. Again, they just come from a meeting, Miss Jimmy. They just come from a meeting where they had taken young people, but they done something. They got called before the church. But there was so much bitterness inside, so much anger inside, so much just resentment inside that he couldn't deal with it. He couldn't deal with it. And so he ended up actually, it was after 9/11, he ended up joining the military. He ended up joining the military, and he got shipped off. And while he was shipped off, she said, he abandoned me. And boom, she filed for divorce. He's over fighting. He's over in a desert somewhere, and she files for divorce and said, he abandoned me. And both of them gone. Both of them gone. I didn't get to tell that part of the story the other day, but what Brother Randy said after I got up, that what Brother Jeff Clemens said, a lot of times it's the devil's playing chess. And I can look back now, Brother Jay, and I can see how this piece got moved, and that piece got moved, and that piece got moved, and then that piece got moved, and it's just a bunch of decisions down, just down through a few years, and took a guy that had a heart for God. I mean, they had a singing group. All the people, three of the people that I'm talking about that were in that picture with me, they had a singing group. They made been a while ago. They made cassette tapes and CDs because some people, some old timers wanted cassette tapes, and some of the new people said, "I don't even own a cassette player. I got to have a CD player." But again, I mean, Brother Wayne, they had a singing group. They would go around the churches and sing. He would go around and preach, and he was good. And he got out, Brother Jay, because of bitterness. He got out because of bitterness. He got out because of jealousy. And so sometimes, when someone teaches like I did Friday night, and I'm talking about your thought life, it kind of gets focused in on one thing. But understand that, I mean, it can be anything. The devil doesn't care. He doesn't care how he gets you out. He just wants to get you out. He doesn't care how. He doesn't care who. You know, if you're easily offended, guess what? He's going to put someone in your face that's going to offend you. It's just going to happen. And we get upset because we're like, and I try to tell my kids all the time, I'm like, look, church people are just people. They're going to disappoint you. They're going if you raise the bar so high, they're not going to be able to meet the standard. And so you have to give them grace. You have to give them grace. Y'all work together. Sometimes someone's having a bad day, and they're just having a bad day. And you can't just be like, that guy, I don't even think he's saved. Well, guess what? What happens when it's you that's the guy that's having a bad day? What happens when it's you that no one can get around that day? You have to give grace to receive grace. And like I said, I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, look, they're just people. They're just people. You know, I mean, most people, you know, for the most part in Concord Baptist Church, you know, people are trying to do right and they're trying to live right, but every once in a while they're just going to do something you don't like. It just is what it is. And so you have to be careful because if you let bitterness down inside, it just becomes this raging fire on the inside. And just like what I said Friday night, eventually you see it. You can't hide it. Bitterness is another one of those things that can't be hidden. And it comes out sometimes in your words. You're like, whoa. Like, really, dude? Like did that really merit that response? It comes out in your actions. You're like, what's his deal? What's her deal? Why is she so angry? Why is she so uptight all the time? It's because there's bitterness on the inside. And you're not dealing with it. You're not giving it to God. You're not giving it to God and say, God, I don't know why, again, I'm going to say something. I don't know why you allowed this to happen to me, but please give me the grace to understand. The greatest example of that in the Bible is Joseph. The greatest example of someone who was done wrong over and over and over again, Miss Jimmy, but dealt with it right. Just dealt with it right. And so you have to be careful. You have to be careful because if you let that come in, just like other sins, it will destroy you. It will consume you until eventually it consumes you. You know, I read the verse in James. You know, lust when it hath conceived brings forth sin, and sin when it's finished brings forth death. You don't see death when you start, but when it's finished, it got you. So that's part, and I'm switching gears right here. So if you in John chapter number 14, in John chapter number 14, verse number 15, here's the opposite end of the spectrum. Again, on your thoughts, what are you thinking? In John chapter number 14, verse number 15, he said, if you love me, keep my commandments. You say, basically all I was talking about, you know, Friday night was negative. But that can work in the opposite. If you're constantly working on your relationship with God, if you're constantly trying to draw nigh to God, He's constantly trying to draw nigh to you. And if those are the thoughts that consume you, you're going to get better as a Christian. You're going to get better as a person. You're going to have a much easier time dealing with the issues of life. You know, my father-in-law, whenever I don't know how many years ago it was. My mother-in-law knows probably. She could tell you when it started happening. But my father-in-law got on this love kick, and when my father-in-law got on a kick, he got on it, at Brother Wayne, and he stayed on it, and that was all he thought about. I mean, I used to laugh because, like, if they would go to a restaurant, if they went to Shoney's, and they enjoyed Shoney's one time, for 6 months, the only restaurant you were allowed to go to with them was Shoney's. It's all they thought about. Where are we going to eat tonight? You didn't even have to ask. We're going to Shoney's. Where are we going? They'd go to Steak and Shake. They did Steak and Shake for a little while. When me and my wife were dating, it was Ryan's. It was Ryan's. You had to go to Ryan's. My mother-in-law was on a diet, and she always wanted to eat a salad, so she wanted to go to Ryan's. Every once in a while, he could convince her to go to Old Country Buffet, but she really would have just rather went to the Ryan's. And so, but he'd just get in the, I called them ruts. He'd get in this rut, and he'd just run down that rut and just stay in that rut. But he would do that. Like I said, he got on love, and like every time, Brother Jay, you were there. You remember, I mean, every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, if he went somewhere with him to a meeting, he was preaching on love. And I missed some of, you know, I was like, I just kind of wish that he was like he used to be. I wish he'd get up and tell the stories like he used to tell. I wish he could get to your heart like he used to get to your heart, but he was all consumed with love. And that's what he thought about, and that's what he worked on. And Brother Jay, you know, I know now that he was right. Brother Tyrone, he was right. If you think about it, so those of us who are married in here, most are or have been, you know, we've got some widows in here and everything. A couple of y'all boys are you know, y'all are wishing you were, but you understand, when you fall in love, I thought about it. Brother Wayne, again, I guess it's story hour with Paul today or whatever. But whenever I first moved to Georgia, Brother Tyrone, me and my wife, we were sworn. We weren't married then, but we were sworn enemies. We were sworn enemies. We did not like each other. We had a very adversarial relationship. She didn't like me, and I didn't like her, so we were adversaries. And so I remember when I moved to Georgia, I left Maryland, and I went to Brother Johnny Jones's. He always had his meeting in May, and I had it planned where I was going to go to the meeting in May. And actually, Miss Jones and their youngest son, Jacob, brought me down here, and I moved in with John. Some of y'all remember John right over here in Fairmount when he lived over there in Fairmount. But her dad, they were having a readathon. Levi wasn't even thought about it at this point in time. But they were having a readathon, Brother Jay, and if you remember, Ricky Gravely and Miss Nolita, they were kind of the youth leaders of the church, and they were going to have an all-night readathon, and they were going to read through the New Testament on a Friday night or whatever. And so her dad said, "You need to go ask him. You need to go ask him." Now I'm gonna say something, Miss Jimmy. This is actually, I mean, you may or may not get a kick out of it, but I believe I'm right. He said, "You need to go ask him, because if you're not nice to him, he's going to end up going down to Concord." And so, because I'd already told him I was going to come to their church, and you know, when you got a little church and you got a prospect of anybody coming, it's a good thing. When you have a big church like Concord, you know, which to a little church, like I came from a little church, and at the time Bible Way was a little church. When you're like, hey, Concord doesn't need another. Which Brother Donnie said that the other day. Brother Donnie said it whenever he was teaching. He told Brother Sammy, he said, "Y'all, Concord doesn't need me. Concord doesn't need me. I need to go somewhere where there's a little church where they need somebody. Y'all have all kinds of people. You don't need someone." And so he told her, he said, "Look," he said, you need to be nice to him, because if you're not nice to him, he's just going to go down to Concord. Nothing wrong with Concord. It's just, hey, we've got a little church. We need people." And so she came to me, and when she came to me, I can still picture to this day, she came to me, and she had a smirk. Look, she's got a smirk on her face right now because, being married to her, I've seen that smirk many times when she's saying something to me she didn't want to say. But anyway, she came to me, and she invited me, and she had a smirk, and I had a smirk because I'm like, you're not. And the whole time in my mind, I'm like, You're not wanting to invite me. You don't want me there. And she's like, I don't want you there, but my dad made me say this. And because I'm a good girl, I'm saying this to you right now. But I'm not happy about it, and I want you to see in my face that I'm not happy about it. And so that was our relationship, Brother Tyrone. That was when I moved to Georgia. That was how it was. And we rolled along that way for a little while. It was, she'd throw a cut and I'd throw a cut. Well, really, we still kind of, we've been married for 26 years now. It's kind of the same way. But anyway, now we're just married. But you understand, like, she would say something smart aleck. I'd say something smart aleck. She'd do something to me, actually, at the readathon. I fell asleep. She painted my fingernails. She'd do something to my mother-in-law. She's laughing back there. But yeah, we would just do stuff to each other. Not because we liked each other, because we didn't like each other. And then we used to go out, Miss Jimmy, we'd go out after church and we just sit out there at Bible Way. It only had like a 1 foot step up. It wasn't very high. And I would just go out there and sit, and then she'd follow me out there. And so anyway, so we go out, and Brother Tyrone, we just started talking. And I'm going to tell you right now, you better be careful who you're talking to. You better be careful. I had a phone call from a girl who used to go to this church, and she's like, hey, I think you ought to talk to this person. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. And she's like, why? I'm like, well, I'm not going to talk to any girl that I would not consider marrying, and I just don't feel like she's the one. So I'm not going to talk, and then her develop feelings for me, and me not even being considered. And I'm not just saying, hey, hello. You understand what I'm saying? She was asking me to do more than that, and I'm like, no. If I wouldn't consider marrying someone, I would never do that to someone else. And so anyway, we would go out, and we would just kind of sit out there, and nothing happened. But then one day, Brother Wayne, and it wasn't intentional. We ended up, and it's my story, but we ended up going to the fair of all places. And we go to the fair, and Brother Tyrone, just something happened at the fair. Me and her ended up, and again, my father-in-law, if he could come back from the grave right now, he'd probably kill Armin and Debbie to this day for letting it happen. But me and her, Levi, we just ended up walking around the fair. Armin, when she's kind of absent-minded anyway, he just ended up walking off, Riley, and me and Aaron were like, what do we do now? We're like, well, I guess we'll go ride a ride. And so anyway, so we went and rode a ride. And Brother Wayne, I was smitten from that moment. And so it, after that, and Brother Jay, he knew me back then, and it consumed me. I worked right over here where Fairmount Poultry is now. I worked right over here, and actually in there, I was praying in there one day, and that's where God told me that it was definitely His will for me and her to get married. But it consumed me. Brother Tyrone, she's all I wanted to talk about. She's all I wanted to see. I would go to work, and then I would want to get home as fast as I could, take a shower, and then go over to their house. The trailer, it's not at the camp anymore, but, the trailer that used to be there at the camp, I would get over there as fast as I could, Miss Jimmy. I'd get over there as fast as I could. And then I would, if I was living with Samuel at the time, and sometimes Brother Jay, I would leave, and I would go from the camp to Promised Land Drive. So what is that, a half a mile? I would go from the camp to Promised Land Drive, and then I would call her when I got there. And we'd already been talking for hours, but we just needed to talk just a few more minutes because it consumed me. She couldn't do any wrong in my eyes. We've been married 26 years. She still doesn't do much wrong. Just when she disagrees with me. But, you understand, it consumed me, Brother Tyrone, and that's all I talked about. Anyone that knew me at that time knew that I was in love with my wife. She wasn't my wife yet. They knew who I was in love with. And so my father-in-law taught us the same kind of love that you feel for your spouse. You can have that same love for Christ. And that love can keep you from falling. The love that says, like Joseph said, I can't, you're not my wife, you're someone else's wife. And how can I do that to my God? How could I sin against my God in doing what you're asking for me to do? If you think about it, and for the most part, except for Michaela, we're all adults in here. But you understand, here's a young teenage boy with teenage boy hormones being approached by a woman that I'm going to assume she was beautiful. And he turned that down, Brother Jay. Why? Number one, because he hadn't thought about it. Number two, because he wouldn't think about it. And number three, because he loved God so much and God said, don't do that, that he said, I can't do that. I can't do that. And if you think about it, there was no law yet. Moses hadn't come yet. There was no law yet. Just like whenever I taught 2 weeks ago with Abimelech, there was no law that said that, there was no law, but there was a law. There was the moral law that was already ingrained in the fabric of those societies that said, hey, a married woman is off limits. But he said, I can't do that to my God. There are things that sometimes that I would like to do, but I'm like, well, I can't do that. I don't want to disappoint my wife. I don't want to disappoint my wife. I don't understand. Some guys do, some guys don't. I don't understand the guys that get married and then all they want to do is go hang out with their buddies all the time. I don't understand that, Brother Wayne. I didn't get married to hang out with my buddies. I didn't get married to hang out with my buddies. I got married to hang out with my wife. And I don't understand, and my father-in-law, he was this way when they first got married, and he testified about it and preached about it many times, that he'd work hours upon hours upon hours, and him and his buddy, they'd plan a fishing trip, and he'd call her and say, hey, me and, is it Jim? Was that his name? Me and Jim are going fishing. Have my stuff ready. When I get home, I'm going to get in the car, and I'm going fishing. And her just sitting there at the house. And if you remember his story, he'd already been gone for like 2 years. Right? They got married. They had their honeymoon for however many days, and then he was shipped off to France for 2 years. There's things that I'd like to do, but I'm like, well, I don't want to do that because then I'm going to have to be gone from my wife too long, or I'm going, she can't do it with me. I turned down a job this year, last year. Last year, I turned down a job. I talked to Brother Randy about it. He helped me pray about it. I turned down a job. It was a pretty good pay increase, Jake. And I'm actually trying to get one of my buddies that used to work for us that works somewhere else. I'm trying to get him the job right now. But I turned it down because it was going to be a week-on, week-off travel. I was going to have to be gone. And I'm like, look, all three of my kids are still at the house. And I'm just not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. But about 4 years, 3, 4, 5 years, depending, when all the kids are gone, as long as Kaiser doesn't mind that I take my wife with me, then I might be willing to take a job like that, as long as they understand that I'm taking my wife with me on those trips. Why? Why, Brother Jay? Because I love her. And I want her to be happy. I want her to be pleased. I want her to enjoy life. Because everyone knows if Mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And that, Don't look at me like that. You know it's true. That is true. Any married man will say. Any married man right here, if I said, Riley, stand up and testify. If Jessica's in a bad mood, is anyone in the house in a good mood? And the answer is no. And Levi, I know she's sitting right beside you right now, but if Michaela's having a miserable time, guess who else is having a miserable time? Levi's having a miserable time. It's just part of it. It's just part of it. So I want her to be happy. Well, guess what? Your relationship with God, and I got time, it should be the same way in Matthew chapter number 22. In Matthew chapter number 22, verse number 35, said, then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbors thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. You say, tell me how to be a successful Christian. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. No, there's got to be a secret. Gabe asked me, he asked me the other day, he said, tell me some commentaries, tell me some books I should read. The Bible. Really, the Bible. Well, my father-in-law, he loved to read. I know Brother Sammy loved to read. My father-in-law said you have to be careful reading, because if you're not capable of spitting out the bones and just eating the meat, those books, those books are not inspired. They're not inspired. They may have some inspirational things in them, but they're not the Word of God. And so, again, for us married men, if you go back to when you were dating and you were all consumed with, my mother-in-law gets on to me. She gets on to me because I spent $80 for a dress in 1997, and now I'm like, can we find it on sale in 2023? But you understand that, like, all I wanted to do was please her, Brother Wayne. All I wanted to do was make her happy. All I wanted to do was see her smile. All I wanted to do was hear her laugh. That's what I wanted to do. And Brother Jay, if my relationship with her is good, it's because I'm still doing those things. When our relationship starts going the wrong direction, it's because I'm thinking about me, she's thinking about her, and the kids are, I don't want to say getting in the way, but we're dealing with things with the kids, and we're not focusing on, hey, I love you, so let me do something to please you. And then things are not good for a little while. And then I tell her to say, I'm sorry, and then she says she's sorry, and then we can get over it. But your relationship with God is the same way. You get caught up in the cares of this world. You get caught up in, I gotta pay my bills. Or, Paul basically, he basically said, hey, if you cannot be married, you're going to have a whole lot better relationship with God if you're not married than if you are. Because once you are married, now you have to focus your attention on your wife. You have to focus your attention on your children. You have to focus your attention on those things. So it's going to take away from your relationship with God. Now, that's not saying don't get married, but that's saying it's going to make it more difficult. It's just a reality. You're pulled in more directions. But you say, tell me how to have a better relationship with God. Think about Him. Read about it. Find out the things. He said, again, John 14:15, if you love me, keep my commandments. You know what happens? If my wife, if I say, hey, this is what I want done, and my wife does it, guess what? I'm happy. My kids. If I say, Grady, I want the trash taken out. And I come home that afternoon and I walk in and there's the trash. I'm like, Grady, what's the deal? And I'm not happy with him. You say, this is simple. That's right, it is. It is. We make it complicated. We make it complicated. We make it like we have to read a 500-page book to tell us how to love God. No, it's just as simple as a man that loves a woman. It's just simple as a woman that loves a man. What are the things God wants? He wants you to do what he says. And when you do those things, guess what? He's pleased with you. And when you don't do those things, he's not happy with you. And it's so simple. But if you don't think about it, like I said, I get busy. I just don't think about it. We're married, you know. I mean, when I come home, she's going to be there. When I get up to go to work, you know, she used to fix my lunch every morning. When I get up to go to work, when it's time to get up go to work, she'd get up and fix my lunch. She's mad at me one time. She put a jalapeno in the middle of my peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But, you know, I mean, listen, she's just that way. But again, that's true story, by the way. That's true story. And so, you know, don't mess with her because she's crazy. But I love her. And so I think Miss Pat's saying she did that to Brother Joe all the time, too. She gave her a thumbs up. Yeah? Yeah. But anyway, you understand. But, I mean, again, you say, how can I fulfill the great commandment? Think about it. Read about him. Talk to him. Me and my wife, our best relationship is when, and I'm not a talker. I mean, some of us are just not talkers. We just don't. I mean, I talk more right here than I do, you know, about any other time. 45 minutes every Sunday morning. But Brother Tyrone, Miss Diane is probably most happy when you just open up and just sit down and have a conversation with her. And I know, Brother Tyrone, you're like me. We're just not talkers. But that's what a woman craves. She craves attention. She craves your affection. She wants to hear your voice. And God is the same way. He craves your attention. He wants you to be focusing on him. He wants you to love him. He wants you to talk to him. He wants you to read about him. And then you fulfill the great commandment. You don't have to be like I said Friday night. You can be in your thought life, what you think about can be this. And you can have a great relationship with God, not because you can write not because like David you can write beautiful words about him, just because you think about him and you want to do the things that please him. Thank you.